Willamette Valley system, as well as the Rogue Basin. And I think Kevin McAllister from our water management group in Portland is going to be speaking principally today about the conservation season and what the water forecast looks like, what our plan is for the season. I know we've got ODF and W reps on the call as well. Pete Samron is here. I wonder, is Mr. Van Dyke on as well? Dan?
Eric, this is Pete. I don't think Dan was able to make it.
Okay. And Kevin looks to be comfortably along the river somewhere. Oh, maybe that's just your background. And you're on mute, Kevin.
I'm actually in the upper Rogue.
Okay. All right. Great. Fairly small meeting today. Looks like obviously the conditions we were experiencing the last meeting or 2 meetings ago, where we did the public meeting, conditions have changed a lot. That's a really good thing. And Kevin, maybe you can help bring us up to speed where we are today and what you expect moving forward this season. It's a small enough group. If folks have questions, down at the bottom of the screen, there's a thing, a little button to raise your hand. If you have a question in midstream, raise your hand or use the chat. We'll make sure it gets answered. All right. I'll be quiet. Let you roll, Kevin, okay?
Sounds good. It looks like we still have a couple people joining. So.
Okay.
And before we get started, and I started the recording.
Great.
As well. But maybe I'll just try to take a little bit extra time on my introduction. So, as Eric alluded to, I'm McAllister. I am the primary regulator for the Rogue projects. I'm the one that you get spammed with every couple times a week, getting schedules out, making those flow decisions. Today's meeting is essentially what we do on a weekly basis, but more of an elaborate meeting that kind of explains how we got to where we're at today. Like Eric said, it's been a very crazy year and it's been very hard to predict. So I want to really emphasize on what were the conditions that got us to where we're at. Can everybody see my screen? I just want to confirm that really fast.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So already did welcome introductions. We're going to go into our operations during the current water year. I'm going to briefly touch on the hydrometeorologic conditions for this water year that got us to where we're at, and then briefly touch on the current fisheries objectives and outlook, and then talk about our runoff forecast and what that looks like as far as our conservation plan is concerned. So current project status as of right now, our project elevation at Lost Creek is at 1870.7, 1.3 feet below rule curve. It's been quite some time since we've been able to say that we're that close or that high up in the pool. Current inflows are sticking around right around 2,500, and today we increased releases up to 3,000 CFS. At Applegate, current elevation is 1979.9. We are, actually I think we're a little bit closer than that as of today, but we're just barely under rule curve there. And inflow is still hanging right around 300 CFS and outflow at 225. As far as the week is concerned, our plan is to maintain those releases at both projects, at least for the foreseeable future, with the most recent inflows that we've been experiencing. So, as you can see, this is an annual plot of Lost Creek. I always like to pull this up because it shows us where we were at this time last year versus where we're at now. And then I think everybody knows we had a pretty horrible water year last year. And no one anticipated that we would be filling the project at the beginning of June, late May this year, because we were even further behind which I'm going to show in this next slide. So this is a stack plot of all of the annual elevations for the Lost Creek project or the last several years. As you can see, this year is the dark red line. I'm going to do this. Can you guys see the laser pointer now? Shows what I'm pointing at.
We sure can, yeah. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no problem. So this red line right here is this current water year. And as you can see, basically going into refill season, we were the lowest we'd ever been at that point in time in history. And we continued to stay that way all the way into mid-May, where we had this gigantic amount of precipitation, which I believe is the wettest May on record, as far as I know, that filled the project all the way up, and it put us in a much better spot for this year because I know in this time frame we were all, I think this is probably about when we had our last meeting, somewhere in this area right here, and everyone was thinking worst case scenario, but fortunately it has rained a ton in the month of May. Actually kind of started at the tail end of April, really. So this is just a quick outlook of the 7-day. I pulled this from yesterday's, which doesn't include today's increase up to 3,000, but it's pretty similar. There is a bump in inflow expected with the most recent precipitation event that's forecasted, which we'll take a quick look at here in a second. But overall, we ramped up to 3,000, and it shows a pretty steady draft starting today all the way through the 10-day period. And so this time of year, one of our biggest drivers for why we release water is the Agnes gauge. But for this year, usually we're trying to be up around this like 3,000, 2,500 in extreme conditions. And Mother Nature is really helping us out on top of our releases. And we've been able to, maintain above 4,000 CFS on a pretty consistent basis. As you can see, we had a little bit of low area, but 3,000 was the lowest we saw in May. And that was with minimal, basically no augmentation beyond what we wanted to release for additional water. And the reason why we release the water and try to have those goals is our temperature targets down at Agnes, which right now are around 68. But as you can see with the most recent storm events and additional releases from the project, at the beginning of June, we're seeing temperatures, below 60 degrees, which is really great migrating conditions for the fish. And we don't have to worry about disease breakouts with them clumped together with low flows. And then here's a quick annual view of the Applegate project. I actually pulled up last year's slide and put it on here with this year's slide just to show how much better we're doing in the last 2 years. We barely filled this project, and here we are in beginning of June continuing to fill this project. If not, it's a very slow rate right now, but we're still technically filling. And it's just a huge improvement over the last 2 water years, if not more. Once again, similar plot as I showed for the Lost Creek project. Not as traumatic, but as you can see, we're definitely in the lower side for the majority of the year of recent water years. There's a couple down below, but for the most part, we're in that lower range of elevations. And then we had a nice jump up at the same time as Lost Creek, and now here we are almost 90% full. Here's the 10-day or the 7-day outlook for the Applegate project. As you can see, we're holding that 225 out as we discussed. I think that in the most recent update today, when this came out, the precipitation had kind of been staying further north. But the atmospheric river appears to be moving further south based off the most recent forecast. So I do expect a bump in inflow somewhere between the 11th and 13th as of right now, but it'll have minimal impact on our operations. We'll continue to hold the 225 for now, and if we end up getting too much water or filling too much that we think it might impact releases later on, we might actually bump up those flows, but I don't anticipate that happening. So Applegate temperatures, as you can see, we've been doing a really good job. Even with a low water year last year, we didn't see any giant spikes in the October to November timeframe. This right here usually happens higher up into like the 60s, and it can be detrimental to species downstream. Other than that, we've been able to mostly meet our targets. But as you can see, it gets hard in these March to April timeframe when we don't have very much water. But then as soon as we started filling that project, we were able to meet those targets much easier because we have more outlets to pull from. So that's pretty much a breakdown of basically our operations. I would also like to actually really point out really quickly that this year, with the conditions we were having, we did a lot more manipulation with the releases from the Lost Creek project. Anytime that we had a potential precipitation event, I mean, these releases between March and April, I mean, we went down to 700. These are very low releases, historically low, I would say, as far as what we were trying to, we were trying to capture as much of this water as possible. So we basically were throwing everything we could at it, even if it was only an additional 200 acre feet a day. But before I move on to the hydrometeorologic conditions, is there any questions, comments about what I've said about our project operations? All right, not hearing any, so I'll keep going. So 10-day forecast is what I wanted to start off with. And which is one of the things I was pulling up, because whenever you launch it from the meeting, it does not want to cooperate. So here's the most recent release from the River Forecast Center as far as the forecast goes. As you can see, starting Thursday, we see this atmospheric river moving inland, and moving to Friday, it continues to move inland, and then by Saturday, it starts moving south. And this tail end right here is what the Rogue is going to be, is what is forecasted in the Rogue to be experienced. And it stays fairly wet on Saturday into Sunday. And then we have this dry spell following it currently through the remainder of the 10-day forecast. Obviously, it can be a bit unpredictable, so we'll be keeping a close eye on it, especially with how high the projects are. Primarily the Lost Creek project. But as of right now, not seeing any real significant impacts to project operations. All right, so this is the updated official 30-day forecast. That's the climate outlook for the next 30 days. Right here, down here is the Rogue. So right now it's saying that we have equal chance of warmer or wetter. So this one right here is for precipitation. I'll start out with that, or temperature. So equal chance of warmer or hotter temperatures than average, or warmer than cooler than temperatures average. I can't talk to them. And then right over here, as you can see, also equal chances of above or below normal precipitation for the next 30 days. And so surprisingly enough, or at least I found this surprising, currently the Rogue is still in a drought, even with all the precipitation that we've gotten between the months of April and May, and continue to get into the month of June. So technically part of it's still in extreme drought. So even with the precipitation that we got, I think we're still statistically in a drought. And so this is the drought outlook moving forward for the entire US. As you can see right here, it's from June 1st to August 31st. And based off this, it anticipates that drought will continue to persist for the next or 90 days basically. But as everybody knows, we do have a full project, so we'll be able to operate those flows as much as possible. And so this I like to show is the statistical runoff at Raygold for this year. Pull up quick. So right now at Raygold, we are seeing about 92% of average of the runoff, which is big improvement from previous years where we were ranging between 50 and 75% or so. And now the fun stuff. So looking at the monthly precipitation for the current month of June, we're over 130% of average. For the year as a whole, across the basin, we're between, roughly 70% and I would say maybe almost 90%, but probably lower towards 70%. So even with all the precipitation that we've experienced this year, the Rogue is still, this is what I was trying to show right here, 14 inches less than our normal precipitation that we experience across the basin. So the overall is just about 70%. So it's a little discolored in here, and that's what we're looking at. But then you look at June and it's just a completely different tale. And then precipitation continued. So I wanted to point this out. So this breaks it down by month, what we experience. And as you can see, basically all the way through March, we're looking at 10% of normal, 39% of normal, 36% of normal. And then you get into April, and all of a sudden we jump up to 144% of normal. And then May, 104% of normal. And then now June, we're looking at 390% of normal, which is just, that's a lot of precipitation for this time of year. And then down here is just looking at the temperatures per month, what we've been experiencing. And the reason I wanted to point this out for April, May, we are experiencing in April, we experienced 5 degrees cooler than normal temperatures. And in May, 4 degrees cooler than temperatures. And why that's a huge deal is because it allows us to not have to release additional releases downstream to make up for those extreme temperature events we've been experiencing the last couple of years in the late parts of April and early May. And so this is just a quick summary of our snowpack and it's just a different picture of the precipitation from the NRCS. So as you can see, we were kind of right in this range. We're just kind of flat lines. And then also things started dropping off at the end of March and the beginning of April. And this is kind of when everybody, the sky was a bit falling. And then all of a sudden we started building snowpack again. And then we ended up right basically around average at the tail end of the snowpack. And so current fisheries objectives and outlook, I'll just briefly touch on this. So right now, our main focus is the migrating spring Chinook. And in general, at this time of year, we will be looking at temperatures down at Agnes, whether we want to release additional water. But as I alluded to earlier, there is plenty of water downstream. So essentially, we are augmenting the project to basically spread it out through the current water year. All right, so that's pretty much the hydrology of why we got to where we're at today. Before I move into our water supply forecasts and our forecasted releases, is there any questions, comments? All right, not hearing any, I'll continue. So this is a breakdown of the forecasted volume for the Lost Creek project. And I wanted to start off with this just because most years you drop down, it slowly starts closing, and then you kind of just see it trends, it flattens out. Whereas this year we started going up after the month of April, which is It's just not a very normal characteristic of this basin, as most of you know. So right now, the forecasted inflows to the projects, or the storage forecast, is 94% of average for April to July, with a total of 487,000 acre feet. And for April to September, 95% of average, which is 608,000 acre feet. I'd also like to point out that how full we are right now, this number is still below average. So I just want to point out that even though we are experiencing below average technically inflow to the projects, the conditions downstream is what really allows us to operate the project and conserve water as much as possible. Because even with that additional precipitation, if conditions downstream dramatically changed and dried out, we would have to augment, and we wouldn't be nearly as full as we are right now. So really, all of our operations are based off of real-time data, and that the forecast is just our best way of looking forward and how we're going to continue to, release the flows. So for Applegate right now, we are 64% of average for both April to July and April to September. And for April to July, as you can see, is 70,000 acre feet. And then for April to September is 75,000 acre feet. And so with that information, we do our planning, or based off those volumes, and continue to plan operations to maximize fisheries benefits, meet our state flow and temperature recommendations, and maintain consistent outflow late into spring and fall for Applegate. And I always like to bring this up before I go into our releases, is what our current authorized purposes are at this project. 26,000 acre feet is towards irrigation, 40,000 acre feet is towards fisheries enhancement, and then 9,200 acre feet is carryover storage, which is the storage that's below our minimum flood pool during flood season. And that flow is defined as that volume is defined to be used between these two authorized purposes. And so this is what the current draft conservation flows look like for the Applegate project through the year. As you can see, we're releasing pretty high releases in May, and then kind of going up to 225 as we are right now, then bumping up in July to 250. We'll hold that 250 essentially all the way through August, and then start tailing that off at the beginning of September. And then finally in October, one would be down to 150. And so this is what those planned releases look like on the most recent model runs. The red line in the middle is the median, and then you have the 25% and the 75%. As you can see, there's not much of a spread between the two with those releases, and we're pretty late in the year, so the level of variability goes down pretty significantly once you have know where your starting place is with the volume. And it looks like, we're going to draft it down like we normally do most years where we have a good amount of water. And so I always just point this out to show how we're doing our temperature control operations. We have different outlets or inlets at different elevations in the project where we pull from. The water gets warmer once it turns over in the summer. So we have warmer water up here and then cooler water down here, and the project operators will mix between those inlets to maximize, or to try to meet those targets that we showed at the beginning of the presentation. And similar for the Lost Creek planned operations, continue to, operate for Agnes if necessary, and then meet all of our additional fishery targets throughout the conservation season for migrating fish. And then all the way into fall to produce good flows for spawning and to be able to maintain that all the way into the beginning of next year. And so similarly to Applegate, but different, is our authorized purposes for the Lost Creek storage. And as of right now, we have 10,000 for M&I, 35,000 for irrigation, 125,000 for fisheries enhancement, 10,000 unallocated storage, and then 135,000 carryover storage, which is below the elevation 1812. And it's a dispersed of these guys right here. And that's how we use that water below that storage. And so here's our planned operations as of right now, which I updated this. That is not the current plan. I apologize. I had copied and pasted it. So right now our planned operations are substantially higher than this. I must have just put it into my model before I ran it. So really quickly, sorry about this, 1 second. While I'm pulling this up, is there any questions so far about the planned operations this year? Mm-hmm. All right, so we're just gonna pretend like that's there and that's not really there. But as you can see, so in June, we're planning to release the 3,000 CFS through the entire month. And then in July, drop down to about 2,500 CFS. And then mid-July, we're looking at 2,000. And then the tail end of July, 1,900, which will hold all the way to the beginning of August. And then about mid-August, we will bump flows back up to about the 2,100 mark, or hold that through till the end of the month. And then the beginning of September, we'll start dropping releases down again. 1,800 from the 1st to the 5th, and then dropping down between the 6th and the 10th to 1,300 CFS. And 1,100 is our planned target for spawning, which will hold through the remainder of the conservation season. And so with those releases, as you can see, we have a nice and full project through the majority of the year, dropping, just below 1812 at the beginning of September on the median, but this also has a pretty small spread as well, and then maintaining that going into the end of conservation season and the drawdown of the project. Similarly to the Applegate project, we have different inlets that we pull water from, which we use to mix and meet temperature targets downstream. So I just like to show that. And then essentially moving forward, I will write up our final plan based off of those flow releases. And then we'll continue to evaluate and adapt the plan throughout the conservation season. As I said, that the real-time operations will always adjust to in-stream conditions. And that is all I had for today's meeting. Unless there's any questions or comments or concerns about what I've presented here.
Yeah, Kevin, let's Pete, I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't have any comments, but on behalf of ODFW, do you have anything that you want to say?
No, Eric, all I would say is what a difference a month makes. Yeah, we're extremely happy. Like I told the local reporter yesterday, we were looking at anywhere from 30 to 50% of the fall Chinook run this year possibly dying because of a lack of water. So yeah, those of us who care about fish should be extremely happy with the turn of events and the weather. I will say that you know, that there were a lot of hardships this last spring. You know, we had flows really low, tributary flows very low. We had a lot of winter steelhead that spawned in the main stem. You know, that's typically not normal. So yeah, it's been a really tough spring, but it's nice to see everything turn around and not have to worry about any disease outbreaks. So we're pretty pleased with that.
Absolutely. Anybody else out there with questions? You can use the chat or just speak up. Great. Well, I guess in the absence of questions, I want to say, Kevin, thanks for your analysis and your explanation today. And if you had any sway in how this weather shaped up, thank you for that too. But I appreciate the picture that you painted, and I think we're in a good spot. As Pete said, certainly a much better spot than we expected to be in. I know we've got a number of other core folks out there. We got Rodney Grabenhorst, Jesse Brownlee. You guys have anything? Chris Gaylord, anything to say?
Hi, Eric. This is Rodney over here at the Rogue. No, we're super excited about where we're at currently with our water, and just Jesse and I were out earlier taking a look at the river, and it looks really nice seeing that 3,000 CFS just flowing out. And we were just watching the fishermen. We just got fishermen lined up down the bank right now, so they're really enjoying the weather and the results of the good wet spring. So thank you again for all your guys' hard work on this.
Thank you, Rodney. Yep, it's gratifying to see, certainly. Well, if there are no other questions, concerns, comments, appreciate everybody's attendance today. Certainly, if we end up midsummer with any other kind of adjustments or anomaly conditions, we'll make sure that we cast a broad net and let people know that we'll get together and talk about it some more and explain what's going on. But I hope that you know, this will be the last big one of these until probably we see how things are shaping up next winter, next spring. So on behalf of the Corps of Engineers, thanks so much, everyone. Take care.